I earned my degree online at Arizona State University. I chose to get my degree at ASU because I knew that I'd get a quality education, they were recognized for excellence, and that I would be prepared for the workforce upon graduating. To be associated with ASU, both as a student and alum, it makes me extremely proud, and having experienced the program, I know now that I'm set up for success. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
Welcome, everyone, to American Girls, the podcast. This is the show where we're reliving the American Girls series, book by book. I'm Mary.
I'm Allison.
And I'm Leah.
Oh,
we're so honored to have one of our fave guests returning to us. Allison, do you want to introduce one of our fave people?
I'd love to. So if you've been with us for a minute, this is a repeat guest. We first met Leah back on episode 59 when we did a review of the Molly's World book, and we talked a bit about historical memory. And we were absolutely thrilled when people suggested that we invite Leah, who is a Holocaust history teacher, back to talk to us about Rebecca Rubin.
Yes, I'm so excited to be back. Rebecca came out when I was like 14, so I remember her coming out really well, and I just reread all of the books, and they're surprisingly good. Their illustrations are beautiful. It's very fun.
I think something we just have to talk about right away, because the people have demanded it. We need you to talk about some of her merch being a bagel, or some of her illustrations, her formative ones being a bagel and a pickle, respectively.
Yes. So there were a few things that were interesting about her school lunch in particular. So her school lunch involves a pickle, a bagel, and a rugala. So rugala are these little delicious cookies that take many hours to make. Pickles are interesting in this because during the progressive era, pickles were kind of one of the main things that were targeted by like the, progressive era Samanthas as like, oh, we can't have all of the Jewish children bringing pickles into school as their school lunch. And this was one of the foods that was specifically targeted in New York by school lunch programs early on.
And why was that targeted?
They were seen as like too flavorful. They were seen as too ethnic, essentially. The pickles that Jewish kids were bringing were different from the like American pickles, which are often kind of sweeter, whereas you get your kosher dills and they're very, very garlicky and very often spicy in a lot of recipes. And it was also just like, it wasn't, what American children were meant to be bringing for lunch. So the pickles are super accurate as to like, yes, she would have been heading to school with pickles. And often actually they didn't bring their lunches, but there were pickle vendors all over the Lower East Side. There was a big kind of push cart culture in the Lower East Side at this time. And so you would buy your school lunch potentially from a pickle vendor, which we see in the All of a Kind family books, those kind of push carts. But then the bagel is so out of nowhere, because it's like the whitest bagel with like American cheese.
Uh-oh.
And I was let's just say that as a Jewish child in the early 2000s, this was never a lunch I was packing. Probably the most common that I would get would be either an everything bagel or a pumpernickel bagel. My favorite was pumpernickel, either just with cream cheese or with like tuna fish. And I was actually like, this was one of the things that like kids picked out of my lunch is, oh, this is weird, because pumpernickel bagels were my favorite, and they're a very dark kind of almost black bread.
Mm-hmm.
And then the tuna fish was, well, smelly.
It's always like a brave moment in school when you bring tuna. I'm not someone who eats tuna, but I always admire people who were like, I'm doing this. Like, I am eating my tuna sandwich. Deal with it. It's happening.
My sister was even more kind of hardcore because she liked tuna fish with ketchup.
Yowza.
As a small child.
Listen.
So that's a lot. But yeah, I've never, in my 26 years, I have never had a like plain bagel with cheddar cheese. So it's just like for a while I thought it was like, oh, is that like a pink slice of lox? It's like, no, it's
Oh, yeah.
yellow cheese. Just very kind of out of left field of like, here, we're going to do the pickles, we're going to do the Jewish cookies, and out of left field, we're going to throw in the most goyish bagel you've ever seen.
Wow.
The only way you can make it worse is if you put bacon on it.
Whoa. Yeah, good point. Good point. Wow. I mean, how do you think that happened?
I don't know. I legitimately do not know. Because it is kind of like the quintessential bagel with like lox and cream cheese. So I'm imagining that like someone was like, well, we can make a bagel with lox and cream cheese. Then people were like, no, people won't know what that is, which I don't think is true. Like that's not an uncommon food in general America, I don't think. Is it?
I don't think so.
I think people know what bagels and lox are.
I don't think I would have known, to be honest with you. Yeah, I'm not sure.
I don't know, because like where both of the cities that I grew up in had like a bagelry, but they didn't necessarily, I mean, they had like bagel and lox, and that was always what we bought, but I don't know if that was what everyone else was buying.
So when you're younger, and we're talking younger, Leah is sitting down to read the Rebecca books for the first time, right? You're so excited, they've just come out. Were you looking at that time for things in the books that felt familiar? Like, were you actively doing that, or is that something that's kind of happened for you later?
I was definitely looking for it. I was 14 when they came out, so I was a little bit past when I was actively playing with my dolls, but a little before I was like, oh, this is cool again.
Mm-hmm.
I read all of the books when they came out, and I remember being really excited when there were like stuff like Shabbat candles and her menorah and like little things that are like kind of less well known, because most people who know anything about Judaism will know like what a menorah is. But like in the first book, they have like what's called a pushka, which is like a little, it's also called a tzedakah box, which is a charity box. And like when I was a kid, my allowance was broken into, I had 3 boxes on my dresser, and I had one for saving, one for spending, and then a tzedakah box. And it's like a big part of like your Jewish education. Like when I was teaching at a Jewish preschool, they started every day with like teaching them to put like a penny in the tzedakah box. And was singing like a cute little song about giving charity. And that's like something that would not be visible necessarily in the mainstream. It's not like the most common thing that people know about Judaism. And like her Shabbat candles were just gorgeous. And just generally it was like, oh, this is my family's story in a lot of ways, which was very meaningful, because this was about when my family was coming to the US, was this period of time.
I was going to ask, like, on 2 levels. One, did you see your own family history in these books? And also, did you see your relatives reacting to the launch of Rebecca in similar ways?
I definitely, especially my mom, because my mom's name is Rebecca.
Love that.
Yeah, so she was just like, she was surprisingly excited, because my mom wasn't like a particularly big doll person. She was like very happy with like me and my sister being into dolls, but she wasn't like a big doll person, and she didn't play with dolls all that much as a kid. She had dolls, of course, because everyone did, but it wasn't like a big thing for her. And I actually asked her a few questions before recording this, and I was like asking, what was it like when these books came out? And it was, for her, she was kind of remembering from her own childhood, she was born in the mid 60s, that like she never would have played a doll being Jewish because it wasn't like a desirable thing. And her family was still very much kind of trying to assimilate at that time. And our family has kind of moved away from that as kind of time's gone on. And my grandmother as well, she had a doll that when she was little, and she was born in the early 30s, but she didn't see herself like reflected back in that doll particularly. Like I think it probably had like blonde curls or something. And dolls didn't have Jewish backstories, and you wouldn't have necessarily put one on them. Just kind of, it was something that was hard, so you don't put your imagination into something that was hard. And I remember, even though both my sister and I were like kind of slightly at that age where we still had our American Girl dolls and we still really liked them, but we weren't actively playing with them as much. But my mom was still like, we have to get the Rebecca books. We absolutely have to read the Rebecca books together. And we were also kind of, we were reading independently by that point, so we weren't doing as much read aloud. And I remember us reading them together, and that was like a big thing of like, no, we read all of the other ones together when you were like 5 and 6. We have to read these together. And she bought this just beautiful box set, and we do not have any other box sets of American Girl books. All of our other American Girl books were either the like Meet book that you got with a doll. I think that's how we got like Meet Kit and Meet Kirsten, and my sister had Molly. But the rest of them were all like, not matching sets, secondhand from thrift stores. But we bought the box set of the Rebecca books. That was definitely, I think it definitely showed just how important it was for my mom. She was like, no, we're getting this. We're getting this. We're reading this. I'm like super excited about having a doll who has my name even.
Right.
And then, of course, it was very much her mom's side of the family's story. I'm named after my great aunt, who was the first in the family to come to the U.S. in, I think, about 1906. And she was an adult at the time, a young adult, but an adult. And she came through Ellis Island. She stays and then went to Chicago. And that's actually where our family settled. My grandmother was born in a very Jewish neighborhood in Chicago. And my grandmother was also raised by her aunt because her mother died when she was about a year old. So she was raised by her aunt and her father. And her father had come a few years later, I think actually during the First World War. And my great aunt, who I was named for, her kind of story was she came into the US and she hadn't eaten for the entire time on the boat, which was about 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And she got a nickel and bought her skirt full of apples. And she ate apples for the whole time she was in New York and the train ride to Chicago.
Wow.
And my mother always remembered her voice really vividly when she was telling that story, and she would do kind of her Yiddish accent. She had a very, very thick Yiddish accent for her whole life. And she'd say, I bought apples.
I love those kind of anecdotes or family history moments that have such rich detail. And, you can imagine how those will be passed down through your family and have been so far. And it really resonates with kind of the specificity of the books. And you're mentioning Yiddish, and I'm just wondering, we've had listeners write in about this, like it's such a strong through line in the book. And for those not familiar, can you talk about like kind of what is Yiddish as a language, like the use of it in the books and so on?
Yeah, so Yiddish sometimes it's actually described as a Creole, which is a pretty decent description of it because it is very much an amalgamation language. It's about 1,200 years old. It dates back to Central Europe we see first written records of it in about 800 CE. It is kind of taking Old High German grammar, writing it with Hebrew letters, but not quite how Hebrew is written with Hebrew letters. And then it has a great deal of loan words and some loan grammar from various Slavic languages, so Ukrainian, Russian, Polish, and then it also has a decent amount of loan words and loan grammar from Hebrew and Aramaic, which are kind of the primary biblical languages. So the ancient language of Jews were in kind of prior to the diaspora in ancient Israel was Hebrew and then also Aramaic and some other languages. And today in modern Israel, the language is modern Hebrew, which is similar but not quite the same. Like, it has words for telephone. And it was very deliberately created in the late 19th century as a speakable language. However, particularly Jewish men had maintained at least reading comprehension in Hebrew for the entirety of diasporic history. So Yiddish is written with those Hebrew characters. Hebrew is not written with vowels. It uses kind of outside of the letters vowels. Yiddish is written with the vowels in it. And you can often kind of say that like all of the grammar is essentially German, and then all of the important words are either Hebrew or Slavic.
Interesting.
So there are a lot of stories, for example, during the Holocaust, where Yiddish-speaking Jews would be able to somewhat comprehend a decent amount of German, but it didn't work the other way around, because you'd have the grammar, but not the vocabulary. And there was very much a hierarchy particularly in Auschwitz, there were a lot of particularly Greek Jews who were transported to Auschwitz, and they were seen almost as linguistically dangerous. They didn't speak Yiddish, and so they didn't understand any German, so they couldn't follow orders. And yeah, so Yiddish was very much the lingua franca of all Jews in Pale of Settlement, which is the area of the Russian Empire where Jews were allowed to live. It originates in what's now Germany and Austria, but it very quickly becomes the primary language in modern Russia, Poland, Ukraine, Lithuania, Latvia, etc. At its height, in the late 1930s, there are about 11 million Yiddish speakers. In the US, we often our main exposure to the Holocaust is from actually quite a Western European lens. So we hear stories from people like Anna Frank, who was a German and Dutch speaker. However, the vast majority, about 80% of Holocaust victims, were Yiddish speakers. And those who were murdered were actually about half of the Yiddish speakers alive at the time, which is a pretty sobering statistic.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to pivot and ask, like, in the context of New York with the immigrant community there, is Yiddish taking on a new importance to distinguish Jewish immigrants from other immigrant populations? Is it like allowing code switching to happen? And there's the scenes in schools where Anna, as a new student, is reverting to Yiddish or struggling to obviously learn a brand new language.
It's definitely, you see a lot of code switching. You see a lot of the slang that is coming up at this time. You see a lot of Yiddish in slang. So things like a schmuck. A schmuck, that comes from the Yiddish word schmeckel, which is penis.
Wow.
Yeah. Let's see. A nosh is from a kind of Yinglish, anglicized word for like a snack. Kvetch is a Yiddish word, just straight up. And you see very much a kind of creation of kind of a Yinglish. One of the things you often see in photographs of the Lower East Side is English words written in Yiddish. So using the Hebrew characters to write an English word. So like you'll find photographs of like a grocery store that says chicken market in Yiddish characters, but that is not the Yiddish word for chicken market. There's Aaron Zeitlin was a Yiddish writer in the mid 20th century, and he wrote a short piece called Monologue auf plainem Yiddish, Monologue in Plain Yiddish, and it really shows, there's a good recording of it on YouTube, and it really shows this kind of like Americanization of Yiddish. And you definitely see it is very much the main language spoken by Jewish immigrants in New York City. And you start to see kind of a mixture with English. You see some English speakers starting to pick up kind of Yiddish slang words, and you start to see kind of some almost Yiddish popular culture. So for example, there was a song that was really popular in the late 1930s and early 1940s called By Mir bist du schön, which is a Yiddish song, To Me You Are Beautiful. And there are kind of three main immigrant groups in the Lower East Side. There's a lot of Jewish immigrants, there are a lot of Italian immigrants, and then geographically, the Lower East Side borders Chinatown. And so this is actually why you get the stereotype of Jews eating Chinese food on Christmas, is kind of Jews going over into, particularly Jews of Rebecca's generation, going over into Chinatown, and you see some kind of language exchange there as well. And you also start to see a fair few marriages. So like there are a lot of Asian American Ashkenazi Jews. And it continues to be kind of the lingua franca for a couple decades. By the 1950s, it's really starting to be assimilated, and really only older people are speaking Yiddish. Today, New York is actually still one of the only places that you can go to like hear Yiddish spoken. But it's much smaller, much more kind of contained to specific neighborhoods. So today, kind of there are three main groups of people who continue to speak Yiddish. There are obviously older people who this was their first language or first or second language. There are academics like me who want to learn it for various reasons. And then there are different groups of Hasidic and Orthodox Jews who continue to speak Yiddish as a first or second language. That mainly exists in a few neighborhoods in Brooklyn, primarily Williamsburg and Borough Park. And like these are the only places where you could like go to order food in Yiddish. There are also some similar neighborhoods in Israel, but even within Orthodox communities, Hebrew is more common than Yiddish in a lot of communities. It's really kind of a few very specific sects that still speak Yiddish as their primary language. And it's probably the biggest is the Satmar Hasidim, who come from the area of Satu Mare in, I believe it's Romania. And even in their Yiddish, you see a lot of English loan words. And that's kind of coming from that immigrant background of we're keeping the Yiddish language because it's a way of keeping the culture alive. But we have the word for cell phone, we have the word for computer, we have the word for, all of these different things that we kind of first encountered in the United States. Yes, I guess that's kind of your very basic overview of Yiddish. Yiddish is a wonderful language. I love hearing it spoken. Yiddish is a schöne Sprache. It was really important to my grandmother as well.
This episode is also brought to you by HelloFresh. With HelloFresh, you get farm-fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes brought right to your doorstep. So what does that mean for autumn? Fall is a great time to get some delicious sweets and to get everyone involved with a HelloFresh limited edition kid-friendly baking kit. HelloFresh is not just for dinners. You can shop HelloFresh Market and find breakfast, snacks, and even desserts. So really, whatever you are looking for, HelloFresh has something, and you can even explore the HelloFresh app. Trust me, if I can use HelloFresh and make meals with all those pre-portioned ingredients, you can too. So whether you're looking for the family-friendly or the fit and wholesome or special veggie recipes, HelloFresh has something that you can save time and money with. We want you to go to hellofresh.com/AmericanGirl16 and use our code AmericanGirl16 to get 16 free meals across 7 boxes and 3 free gifts. Again, that's hellofresh.com/AmericanGirl16 and use that code AmericanGirl16. Yeah, I think you had written to us a little bit about, the grandparent characters, and I'll just say I received some solid feedback from listener Hannah that I say the word B-U-B-B-E totally wrong, and that I said it like booby and incorrectly.
Yeah. It's bubby.
which is truthfully what I thought was coming out of my mouth, and she said, no, you kept saying booby, and that's not what I hear when I say it, but Hannah is like an early listener and left us a voice memo and said, this is what I think you're trying to say, and what you ought to be saying is this. And we had such a long conversation about that. It would be great if you could talk a little bit about sort of, the role of the grandparents in the book. And I think this being maybe one of the series that has the strongest true multi and intergenerational set of stories, right? Like Max being a cousin who's really more of like an uncle, having grandparents, sort of like what you see in the attempts by, Jacqueline Dunbar Green to put all those characters together.
I absolutely love it. It's certainly very historically accurate. the vast majority of families were multi-generational, especially in the Lower East Side. One thing I find interesting is that her grandmother is Bubby, but her grandfather is not Zaidi. So Zaidi is the Yiddish word for grandfather. And there's kind of some almost like disconnect there, because he is, in the books, he is very much drawn as a religious man. He is one of her main, like, he is one of the main people that she goes to with religious questions. And he's also visually kind of almost contrasted with Max and also with her father in terms of how the Yiddish word would be frum, how like observant he is. And so he is, I believe it's in Candlelight for Rebecca. Yeah, it is. On page 31 in Candlelight for Rebecca, we've got this beautiful, just warm illustration of her sitting with her grandfather, and she's got her book and he's got his Yiddish newspaper. And so he is not during any religious services, just during his everyday life. He's wearing a yarmulke. He's wearing kind of very traditional black and white clothing, which is the clothing you'll see most Orthodox and Hasidic men continuing to wear today. And also importantly, he is wearing a full beard. He's cut it shorter, but he is still wearing a full beard. And whereas you see her father and Max have both, Max is, I believe, is completely clean shaven, and her father just has a very stylish, early 1910s mustache. And this was a big deal. This was seen as a very visible sign of assimilation to have cut your beard. There's a saying in Yiddish, a Yid on a bort is besser wie a bort on a Yid. So a Jew without a beard is better than a beard without a Jew. That's another interesting thing about Yiddish. Yiddish literally means Jewish. A Yid, which becomes a slur in English and in other languages, literally means a Jew, but it also essentially means a person. So a typical Yiddish greeting would be "Was macht der Yid?" like, how are you doing? And so her grandfather is wearing a beard, which is, in traditional Jewish law, there are a lot of kind of very gendered visual markers, which of course have changed over time, particularly in the 20th and 21st centuries. But at this time, having cut your beard, and especially like Max being completely clean shaven, that was the visual representation of you have completely assimilated. There's the Torah commandment that says you should not shave the sides of your head or the what are called side locks. So if you're in a neighborhood that has a big Hasidic population, you'll see men and boys with long hair at the sides of their, like at the sideburns, which are called payas. And sometimes they're curled, and all men past the age of puberty will have a full beard, and so very much visually represented as an observant Jew. And similarly, Bubby is very much shown as an observant Jew kind of through her actions, and especially in her kind of Jewish housekeeping. She's really the character that you meet a lot of food through, which is very accurate to a lot of Jewish families. Like in Candlelight for Rebecca, she's the one who's making the matzo ball soup. She's the one who's like making the latkes. She's the one who's, illustrated in the kitchen a lot of the time as well. And she is the kind of visual representations of kind of observance are a little bit more subtle often in women. Traditionally, married women will cover their hair, but this is not as kind of universal as like men wearing a beard, and it's also not necessarily as visual because a lot of women wear wigs. And yeah, so you see the grandmother in the role of the like quintessential Bubby, which I absolutely love. The other thing I was going to talk about Grandpa, or I am going to call him Zaidi because I just can't see him being Grandpa.
Makes sense.
Yeah, is in that illustration, he is seen reading a very specific newspaper. It is Der Vorwärts, which is still published today, both in English and Yiddish. It's called the Jewish Daily Forward in English. And It is, by 1914, it is the biggest Jewish newspaper in New York, certainly the biggest Yiddish newspaper. It is also very openly a socialist newspaper, which is really cool. Like, to the point where they have the forward building has like a bust of Marx.
Whoa.
Now luxury apartments. They have to walk past the bust of Marx to go into their luxury apartments.
That's wild.
It's great. It's fantastic. It's an absolutely perfect little like Easter egg, because it's got the illustration has the big Yiddish letters spelling out Vorwärts, but it also has pretty small, it has English written forward. So all of the people of my mother's generation, and certainly my grandmother's generation, would have been, oh, I remember that paper. My grandmother, every day her father gave her a nickel to buy him Der Vorwärts.
Wow.
And of course, it's also definitely saying something about grandpa's politics, because there are religious papers at this time. There are the Morgenjournal and several others. There's something like 150 Yiddish publications in New York at this time, and something like 6 or 7 daily newspapers. So he has options. He has like a ton of options, and he's picked the socialist paper, like the big socialist paper, which it's kind of perfect, because then when in Changes for Rebecca, when she's becoming pretty politically active, the family's fine with it, pretty much. It's like, well, it's dangerous, but we're not having any problems with the politics of the strikers or anything, which would make sense if Grandpa is reading the foreword.
Yeah, I was curious how you read the politics of the family, and do you see any kind of like generational difference between them?
I definitely see the parents, who are kind of the most precarious generation. They're kind of the generation that has to do the assimilating. I see them being a little more kind of anxious politically almost, whereas Rebecca, who is she's born in the US, she is an American, it feels more okay for her to be politically active, which I think makes a lot of sense. I'm going to pull out Changes for Rebecca just to remind myself. I really loved how they did Changes for Rebecca. It's one of the best books in the whole series, and potentially of American Girl books.
Yeah, we really loved it too. Maybe this is a good opportunity to kind of bring in some reading and some knowledge that you have on a kind of related event of sort of like women taking part in protests. Would you like to drop some knowledge on us about the Great Kosher Meat War of 1902?
Yes. So one of the things that I was looking at when I was looking at Changes for Rebecca was how there were certain ways where it was more socially acceptable for like socially acceptable Jewish women to be participating actively in violent politics. So things like striking and rioting, than it was necessarily for women in other cultures. There are some really old kind of predecessors for this. So in the Hanukkah story, one part of the Hanukkah story that is not often told is where Yehudit gets a Greek general very drunk and seduces him in order to chop off his head and present his head to his soldiers.
Whoa.
Right?
Love that.
Love that. And then, of course, there's the story of Queen Esther, which is the Purim story, which definitely would be Rebecca's favorite holiday because of the Purim spiel. There's traditionally Purim plays in the level of like a Christmas pageant. Like, these are very funny and cutesy, but she would have been like hardcore micromanaging like a Purim spiel. I can totally see that. But one thing you see in the Lower East Side is women who are seen as doing womanhood correctly. So people like married housewives also participating in rioting. And one of the first times you see this is one of my favorite historical events, which is the 1902 kosher meat riots.
Yes. You were like pounding your fist on the table as you said that. Like some people are like, my favorite event is the Super Bowl. Like, is this your Super Bowl? Like,
this is my Super Bowl. So backstory. So we've got the progressive era. We've got first President Roosevelt. We've got the Chicago meat industry, which is an absolute disaster. We've got, Upton St. Clair and the jungle coming out, and it's all like cow blood and guts everywhere, and it's all a big thing. And we're right in the middle of trying to break the robber barons of the meat industry. So kosher meat is inherently more expensive. It's also a lot harder to find. Lower East Side in New York, it would have been super easy to find, but it was more expensive. It was about, let me see, I have it written down. It was 12 cents prior to the strike for a pound of kosher beef, which was, I can't remember exactly how much things like pork were, but it was significantly more. I'm going to bring up the book because it is phenomenal. You know how most academic books are a little dry?
Sure.
This one is not. The author has included a dramatis persona in his academic book on the kosher meat riots. It's called The Kosher Meat War by Scott D. Seligman, and it is phenomenal. It is a fantastic book. It brings together President Roosevelt, robber barons, oil barons, and the impoverished housewives of the Lower East Side in this wonderful, ridiculous story. So he does go into a lot of depth into like the cost of things. So rent typically costs about $10 a month. A well-paid man typically was bringing home about $2 a day, of which about 30 cents a day was going to rent, and about 50 to 60 cents was going to food. By far the most kind of expensive per pound item was beef, because to make kosher beef, you have to go through not only the kosher slaughtering process, which means you have to have a healthy animal, which, as Upton Sinclair made very clear, was not necessarily true in the rest of the meat industry at the time. The animal cannot have any blemishes, so it can't have any like skin lesions or anything.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be slaughtered with a trained shochet, which is a kosher slaughterer. It has to go through a process of salting and draining the blood. So kosher salt is called kosher salt, not because it is kosher, but because it is used for koshering, which is making meat kosher, because that kind of big grain salt, just to be graphic, draws out the blood from an animal, and blood is not considered kosher.
Got it.
And so you've got kind of the kosher meat version of the kosher meat robber barons, and the industry is very tightly controlled by, I believe it was called the Kosher Meat Trust, which meant that they could essentially kind of change prices how they wanted to. And to be fair to the guys in the Kosher Meat Trust, at the time, a lot of other complicated stuff was going on in the beef industry that meant they were having to pay a lot more for their beef. But pretty much overnight at Passover, kosher meat jumps from 12 cents per pound to 18 cents per pound, and everything goes bananas. So the laws of Passover mean, one, it is a holiday, so you're throwing your whole budget at getting the nice fancy food for your family. Having meat is very traditional. One, it's one of the few things that is kosher for Passover, because you're not allowed to eat any leavened.
Oh, right.
And for Ashkenazi Jews, this goes pretty hardcore. So not only are you not allowed leavened bread, fine, you're not allowed any other grain or grain-like thing, which can ferment and rise. This includes, for Ashkenazi Jews, things like corn and rice. Sephardic Jews are like, no, that makes no sense. We eat corn and rice on Passover. What are you doing? Additionally, a smaller subsection of Ashkenazi Jews also hold by a tradition called gebrox, which means broken. So you don't break up matzah and get it wet, because then the matzah could ferment. So being a housewife in the early 1900s in the Lower East Side with, you know, your average probably is 5 or 6 children, many were having many more, plus your extended family, you are pulling your hair out at this point. Like, we're like, today you pull your hair out at Passover. Back then they were absolutely completely stressed. Additionally, Passover of 1902 starts at a really inconvenient time, because at the time there were blue laws in effect, so that you weren't allowed to do like grocery stores weren't allowed to be open on Sundays in much of New York. And this year, I believe Passover was starting on a Monday, which meant that you couldn't buy stuff for 2 days before. And the women of the Lower East Side were already getting so antsy that the police commissioner told the New York City Police Department to not, like, for like a day, don't enforce this law because we will have a riot on our hands. Because you can't buy on Saturday because Shabbat, which means if you've got something like meat, you can't buy meat because it's perishable and none of you have ice boxes.
Right.
So when you have this huge spike in price, the women lose it. They are so pissed off. And these are people who know how to organize. The union movement is already getting started, especially in the, you know, garment industry in the Lower East Side. You've got these women who are already kind of on their like kind of last straw, and it jumps up 6 cents a pound. And pretty immediately, the women organize into unions or kind of opposing trusts. So the it was a great name. The Ladies Anti-Beef Trust.
Great brand.
We are women and we are anti-beef. Which, can I just say, that sounds like a lesbian bar?
I was thinking about that Wendy's ad from like the 80s. That's like that old lady who's like, where's the beef? I mean, she could probably be part of the anti-beef league too.
Yeah.
As any good doll owner knows, or anyone that has hair that they take care of knows, there are so many different things, from curling and straightening to random haircuts and hairspray, that can do damage to your hair. If you are like me and you want longer, thicker hair, and there might be some things that have done some damage to your hair over the years, Vegamour is something that you definitely want to give a try. With Vegamour, you can get healthy, beautiful looking hair without using harmful chemicals. All of their products are cruelty-free and never contain parabens or hormones. Having Vegamour is something that I actually really love in my shower. I look forward to how good it smells and what it actually does for my hair. With Vegamour, you can use a shampoo, a conditioner. Those can be real game changers. And there is also a Grow Revitalizing shampoo and conditioner kit. This is something that I absolutely adore using, and it's part of my daily routine. With Vegamour, there is no risk to try because they have a 90-day money-back guarantee, with 91% of customers saying that they saw visibly thicker hair in just 3 months. You will not want to run out. Don't let damage of the past hold your hair back. Go to vegamour.com/AmericanGirlsPod and use our code to get 20% off. That's vegamour.com/AmericanGirlsPod. And that code is American Girls Pod. Thank you, Vegamour, for sponsoring our show.
So the woman who initiates the strike is a woman named Sarah Zimmerman Edelson, who was born in 1852, and she is an immigrant, and she is a religious woman. He points out that she keeps a strictly kosher home, and she is also visibly religious. She dresses according to Talmudic modesty, and outside of the house, she wears a sheitel, which is a wig, so she covers her hair outside the house. She went to a specific mikveh at an Orthodox synagogue, which is a mikveh is a ritual bath, which married Jewish women go to at certain points in their menstrual cycle every month. And so she was born. Oh, I should also mention she is like a force to be reckoned with. He describes her as medium height, broad shouldered, and like big. So this is like an imposing woman. She's a natural leader. She was born in the Pale of Settlement and was among the first Eastern European Jews to come to New York. She came very early in 1868. Most Jewish immigrants were not coming until after 1881. She married a man named Joel, and she had, by 1900, she had given birth to 6 children, but had only 4 who survived to adulthood. 3 of her children were already grown by 1902, and she earned additional income for the household working as a shadchan, which is a matchmaker. So I'm sure you are familiar with the song from Fiddler on the Roof.
Matchmaker, matchmaker, make me a match. Yes.
This is an actual job in the Jewish world.
Love that.
Yeah.
So when she takes it to the streets with the other women, like what happens?
She encourages the other women to engage in stuff like throwing bricks at butchers that continue to be open after she's told them to close.
Whoa.
She encourages women to go into the butchers and harass any other women who are buying meat. And this goes on for quite a while. I believe about a month before the cost is finally lowered back down because the women of the Lower East Side have just out and out said, no, we're not paying that much for kosher meat. And it came to the point where there were, the New York City Police Department became involved. A lot of women were beat up and assaulted. There were even essentially strike breakers. On one of the kind of biggest days of the rioting, over 100 women were arrested. The boycott spread to the Bronx and to Harlem. So other Jewish women in other neighborhoods started organizing. And importantly about these women, these were not, the young women who were working in sweatshops, who were, tending to be involved with like strikes on garment factories. These were mostly middle-aged, like housewives. The average age of the strikers was 39.
Do you think Rebecca's mother would have been part of this strike?
I can actually kind of more see her grandmother, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Her mother seems kind of like a little reserved, but I can see Bubby taking to the streets.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Oh, this is another great one. So there's one of the main things you would be buying beef for is the Shabbat stew, which is called cholent. And Sarah encourages the boycott leaders to go around to other women's houses and check their cholent pots to make sure they're not cooking meat.
Wow. I mean, talk about like stew valence. Is that what we're calling that?
Stew valence, yes.
Oh my God.
They later formed the Allied Conference for Cheap Kosher Meat. And of course, every time there's a big hike in kosher meat prices, this happens again. And who's at the head of it in the 1930s but Clara Lemlich?
Of course.
Of course. She led the boycott in 1935. I mean, there are so many interesting things about this story. But one of the main things I find interesting about it is that it is women striking based on their role as housewives and domestic laborers, of basically being like, we are already working so damn hard in horrifying conditions. Most of them are also like working for a wage. It is very difficult for married Jewish women to have, say, a factory job, but a lot of them are working as shadchans. A lot of them are working as laundry women. A lot of them are working in piecework, so sewing work that they can do at home, as well as, of course, raising and managing families. And they create this like entire informal network that quickly becomes very formalized and use all of the tactics of your traditional labor union, from, striking to boycotting to breaking up the scabs who would go into the kosher butchers and buy meat. And they, then it was their daughters a few years later who were participating in the uprising of the 20,000 and in the, continued labor uprisings that we see in Changes for Rebecca, because most of the women participating in these were young, because those were the women who were working in factories, but they had seen their mothers throwing bricks.
That's really interesting, because it kind of seems like in Changes for Rebecca, which I agree with you is one of my favorite all-time American Girl books. Alice and I think said that on that episode, but there's like lacking in that book is kind of that link back to maybe like Bubby's generation, or like a consciousness of like, we learned this from you, like Rebecca kind of sitting with Bubby and being like, I got knocked off the speaking post and this and that, and like Bubby being like, yeah, I also like once threw a brick at a butcher, like I get it, like I'm proud of you.
Totally. That would have been great. And I could totally see Bubby participating in this.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
We'll definitely have to have our listeners check out that book. It sounds like, I know it's lit you up inside, and certainly like your account of it has done the same for us. Allison, do we want to hit Leah with some rapid fire questions from our listeners?
Perfect.
Yeah, and we're so lucky that we're going to be chatting with some folks who've worked on interpretation at the Tenement Museum. So we're going to kind of hear...
Oh my gosh, I absolutely adore the Tenement Museum.
Us too. And so we're kind of excited to get some information on Rebecca's world from different angles. But I think an awesome maybe kind of wrap up question is, what do you think Rebecca might be into if she were alive today? Not a very elderly Rebecca, but if we were able to meet a Rebecca approximately our age living right now,
yes,
you might be interested in watching, reading, listening to.
So our age, or like a 14-year-old right now, or like a 10-year-old right now?
Let's make her our age, just for the sake of fun.
Okay, so I'm thinking she's like really into like Jewish feminism, obviously. My guess is she's like probably working with like, I don't know, like JQY, like as Jewish Queer Youth, or maybe like, I don't know, she definitely like went on Birthright and posted so many photos on her Instagram with a cute Israeli soldier.
Oh my God, love that.
That's definite. She has big opinions about the Funny Girl drama.
What are those opinions?
I think she is very angry that the actress has changed. I think.
Okay, thank you.
I think she's like, no, you made the incorrect choice, primarily because she wanted to be hired.
Oh,
love that.
I think that's probably true.
Yeah, I think she's probably into like, I don't know, I can see her maybe being part of like a Reform synagogue and is like really hyper managing the kids' Purim spiel. Like she's like, no, we have to have costumes and they can't be made of cardboard. We have to have real costumes. We have to have like special effects. I can see. So this is a deep cut. Her favorite Jewish online content is the web show Soon by You.
Okay.
which is came out a few years ago. And it's like young modern Orthodox millennials trying to make it and find love in New York City. I think she was probably a member of a Jewish sorority, if we're honest. I think she is like really big on posting like Jewish food to her Instagram. Like every time she buys like a rugula from a cafe, she's like, I'm posting a photo of this. Obviously she still wants to be an actress, but I think she also might want to be like an influencer. She just gives me that vibe. And I think she'd also be super politically active. I think she would be probably marching with like Jews for Racial and Economic Justice in New York. I think she would probably be continuing to make sure she's like getting to speak at like protests, partially because she has things to say and partially because she likes public speaking. Yeah, so I think that's what I imagined for Rebecca. I think she would be absolutely killing it.
Okay, does she find the Sex and the City reboot and Just Like That more cringy, or the rehearsal with Nathan Fielder? Like, which gives her more of a full body cringe?
Probably the Sex and the City, because of its unrealistic portrayals of transportation in New York City.
Okay, I like that. I think that's a great answer.
She's like, no, we all take the subway.
Okay, I like that. That's very good. So, Leah, if people want to catch up with you and they want to kind of see what you're up to on the internet, you have, I think, the best Instagram story of anyone that I follow consistently. I learn something just about every single day, and I try to read everything that you post. Where would you like people to find you on the internet?
I am at Peculiar Leah on Instagram, and mostly just Instagram. And yeah, I am pretty active on Instagram. It's definitely the best way to find me.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. I mean, every time you drop by, I learn something new. Like, I'm still reeling from you're frankly just repeating to me an accurate summary of the movie The Boy with Stray Pajamas last time around. And this time I'll be thinking about, yes.
So there has been a book that has come out since then from a man who I want to be best friends with, who coincidentally added me on LinkedIn.
Oh
my God.
Which was really cool. But so there is a scholar who works at Yad Vashem named, I think, Rich Brownstein, I think is his name. I need to check that. But he has the dubious honor of having watched every Holocaust movie and writing a book about it. Yeah, Rich Brownstein. He recently published a book called Holocaust Cinema, The Complete History. And he was also on a video on a YouTube channel that I watch where he did like Holocaust films best to worst.
Wow. That sounds like an iconic span. Yes. Well, thank you for that hot tip. Now I can get even more educated and probably appalled by some of the things out there. But I so appreciate every time you stop by. Allison, where can people find you if they want to check in?
Yeah, so they can find me at Allison Horrocks on Twitter and Instagram. And Mary, where should they find you?
Best place to find me is on Instagram at Mimi Mahoney or on Twitter at Mary Mahoney123. And Leah, thank you again. This is always such a joy to learn from you. So thanks so much for giving us your time.
Thank you so much for having me.